Yella Beezy is facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars over the death of Mo3 after prosecutors sought to use his own songs as evidence against him. Despite his defense team's efforts to keep them excluded, the case has become even more difficult. This could mark the permanent downfall of one of Dallas rap's biggest stars. Here's the full story. The 4 songs in the court file. In July of 2026, Marquise Conway sat in a Dallas County courtroom while lawyers argued over his music. His attorneys were there for one purpose. They wanted 4 of his songs kept away from the people who will decide his case. The songs have names. Keep It in the Streets, On Your Head, Take 3, Gassed Up. Dallas County prosecutors listed all 4 in an amended notice of extraneous evidence filed in February of 2026. The state claims the lyrics are tied to a feud. The state claims that feud ended with a man dead on a freeway at noon. That man was Melvin Noble. Dallas knew him as Mo3. He was shot on Interstate 35E on November 11, 2020, in the middle of the day in front of traffic. Conway is not accused of firing the shots. He is accused of paying for them. The charge is capital murder for remuneration. In Texas, that means arranging a killing and paying or promising to pay the person who carries it out. It is the highest charge in the state, and a conviction carries life in prison without parole. Conway has pleaded not guilty to the charge in court, and he has not changed it. The reason the songs matter comes down to how this kind of case works. The state does not have to place Conway on that freeway. It does not have to put a gun in his hand. It has to give the jury a motive, and it has to prove that money changed hands. Motives are difficult to prove. There is no confession in this case file. There is no video showing Conway giving any order. So prosecutors search for the motive in the places where both men spoke publicly, including interviews, social media, and official records. 2 of the 4 songs carry greater weight than the others. Prosecutors claim Take 3 and Gassed Up appear inside text messages that Conway allegedly sent to a co-defendant on the day Mo3 was killed. The remaining 2 songs are older. Keep It in the Streets was released in February 2020, while On Your Head followed in May. Both arrived months before the shooting. Keep It in the Streets is the only one with publicly available lyrics. Its chorus revolves around getting someone handled, striking back, refusing to cooperate with police, and leaving a man lifeless. The verses describe hits, bounties, and bullets. Even the title itself suggests how conflicts should be settled. On Your Head has no complete public lyrics. Prosecutors instead focus on its title. In street language, putting something on a man's head means placing a price on him. The filing requested more than music. Prosecutors also want social media posts, previous shootings, alleged gang connections, a civil court ruling, and a timeline covering the years between both rappers. A Dallas homicide detective testified during the hearings about how the state built that timeline. Investigators traced the course of the conflict through lyrics, posts, and interviews, partly because witnesses refused to come forward. In court, the state presented what it believes all of that ultimately proves.
And the jury is entitled to hear about what transpired that led to one Dallas rapper placing a bounty on another Dallas rapper.
A bounty. That is the exact word the state used in open court. Prosecutors told the judge that the conflict between these 2 men never remained inside songs and never stayed confined to the internet.
These were not just words, people were dying.
The defense argued that a professional artist cannot be judged through his music. Conway's attorneys insisted the songs are protected artistic expression, that the state is asking 12 jurors to mistake performance for reality, and that the material would unfairly influence the jury before hearing a single fact. Judge Chica Mays listened to both sides over several days of hearings. She has choices. She can exclude the songs. She can admit selected portions with instructions. She can allow prosecutors to play every track. 2 other men are also charged in the same killing. Kewin White is identified as the alleged shooter. Devin Brown was indicted for his alleged role in the planning. Their cases have moved alongside Conway's. Conway has remained at home since March of 2025. A judge reduced his bond from $2 million to $750,000 with attached conditions. He wears an ankle monitor. He is allowed a limited number of studio hours each week. That remains the arrangement. A rapper on house arrest, tracked by an electronic monitor, is still permitted to record music on a schedule while a court decides whether the songs he already recorded can be presented to a jury as evidence that he ordered a man's death. None of the 4 songs mention MO3 by name. Not one of them identifies anyone directly. That is the gap the state must close. And it is the same gap where the defense continues to stand. To understand how 4 song titles became part of a murder case, you have to return to a time when both men were still rising in Dallas. 2 rappers from the same side of Dallas. MO3 was born Melvin Noble. He emerged from the Dallas area with a voice that sounded like it had survived every hardship imaginable. He sang just as much as he rapped, and the pain inside his music made people believe him. His biggest breakthrough came with the remix of Everybody alongside Boozy Badass, the Baton Rouge legend who treated him like a younger brother. Before long, MO3 had built more than 800,000 followers on Instagram and a fanbase that reached far beyond Texas. Yella Beezy came from the same streets. Born Marquise DeAndre Conway, he exploded onto the scene with a record that dominated the South. That's On Me became an anthem in 2017, the kind of song heard in barbershops, car washes, and high school parking lots until it felt impossible to escape. He followed it with Back at It Again alongside Quinn NFN and Gucci Mane, opening doors to national radio and opportunities few Dallas rappers ever reached. It should have become a success story for the city. 2 artists from the same streets, both winning, both representing the same hometown. For a while, it genuinely looked that way. Footage that surfaced years later showed both men together inside the same recording studio before everything changed. But Dallas is a city that never forgets. It has always argued over who truly represents each neighborhood, who genuinely came from where, and who borrowed a reputation they never earned. Oak Cliff carries serious weight in that debate. So does the question of who someone really was before fame and money arrived. Both artists were chasing the same audience and fighting for the same piece of the city's identity. In hip-hop, that overlap alone is enough. Add in the ordinary things that drive young men apart, and the tension rises without anyone ever announcing it. There was also the issue of timing. Yella Beezy reached national success first. A record like That's On Me can completely transform a man's life within a few months, and it changes how everyone around him is viewed. MO3 was putting up bigger numbers in the streets, while Beezy was dominating the charts, and both fan bases had their own reasons for believing their artist was the real one. Reports covering the early friction point to those very issues. XXL and other outlets referenced early personal disputes, including one reportedly involving a woman, layered over the growing competition about who truly represented the neighborhood. None of it had become headline news yet. It lived inside group chats, quiet remarks, and songs where nobody mentioned a name directly. That is usually how these situations survive. Silent, coded, and impossible to prove. One lyric here, one post there. Nothing anyone could confidently present inside a courtroom, which was exactly the point, and it remained profitable for both of them. Beefs generate streams. A little tension sells tickets, fills comment sections, and keeps 2 names appearing together across blogs. Plenty of rappers have created manufactured rivalries for years and walked away wealthier without anyone ever getting hurt. The problem is that a city cannot always separate entertainment from a genuine grudge. Once fans begin choosing sides, the artists stop controlling where the conflict goes next. Other people started carrying the conflict for them, and those people answered to nobody. Then a comedian entered the picture. Roy Pate was a well-known Dallas personality with a loyal following of his own. He had built a reputation for roasting people online, and he was also known to be close to MO3. His sharpest weapon was his voice, and he aimed it directly at Yella Beezy. Pate publicly questioned whether Beezy truly came from Oak Cliff the way he claimed. In a city where that question holds real weight, ridicule like that hits even harder than a diss record. A rapper can answer another rapper. That is a battle fought on familiar ground. But there is no easy way to answer a comedian who turns your entire identity into a running joke because every response only gives him another punchline. For nearly a year, that was the situation. 2 rappers refusing to mention each other publicly. A comedian standing in the middle willing to say anything. A city watching closely and drawing its own conclusions about what it all meant. Nobody involved appeared to believe it would become something serious. Yella Beezy was booking larger shows. MO3 was building the momentum that would eventually make him a household name across the South. There was money waiting for both of them, and every reason to let the entire situation fade away. Then October 2018 arrived, and everything building beneath the surface finally exploded into the streets. The death that changed everything. In early October 2018, Roy Pate was shot in North Dallas. He did not die at the scene. He fought for several days before a blood clot claimed his life. Pate died on October 13, 2018. That death became the turning point. Everything before it could be seen as rivalry between artists. Everything after it looked like something far more serious. MO3 responded the only way a rapper could in public. He made music. He released tracks including Let Me Find Out and Slide on M. But those records no longer sounded like entertainment. They sounded like a man carrying grief who had already reached a decision. Every lyric carried that weight. He rapped about receiving the call that his friend had died while he was mourning. He rapped about ignoring that call because he had been planning since morning. He rapped about catching somebody slipping outside a club, about enemies knowing they had to stay ready, about never letting anything slide. He never mentioned a name. He never needed to. Dallas understood it. The media understood it. Years later, prosecutors would argue they heard those messages too. That is the hidden trap beneath this entire case. Coded lyrics work because everyone inside that world understands them while nobody outside it can truly prove what they mean. It is a language built on plausible deniability. Yet inside a courtroom, that same language can be interpreted by anyone the state chooses to place on the witness stand. Then, barely a day after Roy Pate's death, the streets appeared to answer back. Yella Beezy was driving on a tollway through Louisville, north of Dallas, when another vehicle pulled beside him and opened fire. His car was riddled with bullets. He was struck 3 times, but survived, spending only 1 day in the hospital before being released. The timing was impossible for the city to ignore. A man publicly mocks you. That man dies. Then you are shot the very next day. The rumors almost wrote themselves. Retaliation. Revenge. A conflict that had finally spilled from the internet onto the streets. But rumors are not evidence, and both sides publicly refused to fuel them. No one was ever charged in that tollway shooting. For years, it remained an unsolved attack on a rapper who had just been publicly mocked by a man who was now dead. In most cases, the story ends there. In this one, it would later become far more significant. That silence is exactly why the interview footage from 2019 feels so unsettling today. MO3 sat down and was asked directly about the shooting of the man many believed was his biggest rival.
When Yella Beezy got shot up, what were your thoughts about that?
Shit, I gotta stay out the way.
That was his entire answer. No sympathy, no celebration, and no denial because none was offered. He described the whole situation like the weather, something that simply happens in a place where violence is part of everyday life. Then he went even further and completely rejected the idea that there was ever a rap feud at all.
Yeah, nah, you know, they was misinformed about some rap beef, and I was like, I ain't got no rap beef with nobody.
He blamed the internet for creating a war that never truly existed and dismissed the surveillance clips and fan-made collages people kept using as supposed proof. But the consequences had already become real, no matter what anyone chose to call them. MO3 revealed during that same interview that he had been shut out of Dallas venues for nearly a year because of a shooting incident. He was paying the price for something that happened 45 minutes outside the city. Yella Beezy played the same game from the opposite side. In his own interviews, he acted as if MO3 barely mattered. He questioned who the man even was, denied listening to the records people called diss tracks, and blamed the entire narrative on managers, the media, and people chasing a storyline. 2 men insisting nothing was happening while the growing body count around them suggested otherwise. There is one version of this story where both of them were telling the truth as they understood it. Neither man needed to personally hate the other for the situation to become deadly. Crews can escalate things on their own. Friends of friends settle scores nobody ever approved. Someone's cousin takes an insult personally and acts without permission, but the evidence kept refusing to support that explanation. Every few months, something happened that coincidence alone could no longer explain. Then, in January 2020, the illusion finally shattered. MO3's manager, Brandon Rainwater, claimed he was attacked outside a Dallas strip club by Yella Beezy and several associates. He said he walked away from it with a dislocated hip. Surveillance footage of the street confrontation quickly spread. He filed a lawsuit. Years later, a civil jury ruled that Conway had assaulted Rainwater. Prosecutors later added that finding to their case file for a reason that had nothing to do with the injury itself. It marked the first time a courtroom, rather than online speculation, connected Yella Beezy to someone inside MO3's circle. Rumors carry no weight during a trial. Court rulings do. That happened just 10 months before the freeway shooting. High noon on Interstate 35E. November 11th, 2020 began like an ordinary Wednesday in Dallas. MO3 was driving a gold sedan north along Interstate 35E, just south of the Dallas Zoo, in the middle of the afternoon. Traffic flowed normally. The sun was shining. Nothing about that moment hinted it would become his last. Behind him, a Kroger 18-wheeler was heading toward downtown with its dashboard camera recording. Nobody planned for that. The truck simply happened to be in the right place at the worst possible moment, and because of it, the next 90 seconds were captured forever. Years later, a prosecutor would stand before a judge and replay that footage frame by frame.
Just for context, this is approximately noon on I-35 heading northbound.
He stopped the footage at the 19-second mark and asked the court to look at two vehicles moving in the left lanes.
16 seconds, you see a gold sedan in the far left lane and a black sedan in the second lane to the left.
The gold sedan carried MO3. The black sedan, according to the state, carried Kevin White. The prosecutor allowed the video to continue before stopping it again at 1 minute and 37 seconds, then delivered one sentence to the judge that has haunted this case ever since. The victim never returns to the frame. Here is what happened in those missing moments. The black sedan pulled alongside. A man stepped out holding a gun. Then MO3 did something that has haunted everyone who has watched the footage. He opened his door and ran on foot across a busy interstate while traffic continued moving around him. He was chased along that freeway and shot multiple times. A woman inside a nearby vehicle was struck by gunfire despite having nothing to do with the attack. She survived. MO3 was rushed to a hospital where he was pronounced dead. He was only 28 years old and in the strongest period of his career, killed in broad daylight while strangers watched through their windshields. Police quickly identified the alleged shooter. Kevin White was identified and charged in connection with the killing. Before the murder case could reach a jury, Kevin White was sentenced in 2022 to 105 months in federal prison after pleading guilty to possessing a firearm as a convicted felon. He served his federal sentence while the state murder case continued against him. Devin Brown was also indicted, with prosecutors linking him to the planning of the killing rather than the shooting itself. According to the state's theory, this was never a sudden act of road rage. Someone had to know where MO3 would be. Someone had to be waiting in traffic ahead of time. Someone had to step out of a vehicle in broad daylight on a public interstate and carry out the attack in front of witnesses. That is preparation. And preparation is what transforms a killing into a murder-for-hire case. 3 days later, Boozy Badass was shot in Dallas while visiting the city to mourn his friend. He survived. Prosecutors would later point to that shooting as another chapter in a rivalry that continued leaving bodies behind before the investigation suddenly went quiet. Not closed, just quiet. Years passed with a murdered rapper, an accused shooter, and a city that had already decided who it believed was responsible without any official confirmation. MO3's family buried him and waited. Fans created tribute videos and waited. Every few months, rumors spread that an arrest was coming, and every few months, nothing happened. 4 years is a long time to live with a killing that happened in front of dozens of witnesses in broad daylight. Investigators kept chasing the details nobody could see. They collected phone records. They collected financial records. They collected social media. They interviewed people who did not want to speak in a case where cooperation was viewed as a personal failing. That final problem shaped everything. A detective later testified that investigators had to trace the pattern of the feud through lyrics, posts, and interviews, partly because witnesses refused to come forward. When nobody will talk, the state builds its case from whatever the people involved said publicly when they believed they were only performing. One thread connected back to the tollway shooting Yella Beezy survived in 2018. Prosecutors played his own recorded police interview from that night during a later hearing. And then a Dallas homicide detective explained what investigators eventually discovered about the vehicle used against him. That single discovery changes the entire story. It suggests the two shootings were not separate tragedies in a violent city. It suggests they were the same conversation happening 2 years apart in two different directions with consequences that continued to shape the investigation. On March 18, 2025, a Dallas County grand jury returned the indictment. Conway was charged with capital murder, while remuneration was accused of hiring White and offering payment or the promise of payment to carry out the freeway killing. He was taken into custody and booked into the Dallas County Jail. Mo3's mother, Nicole Williams Noble, shared 4 words on Facebook that represented what many people in Dallas had waited years to finally hear. "Justice for my baby." The evidence the jury will hear brings everything back to that courtroom and the battle that will determine how this case is ultimately presented. The defense started moving immediately after Conway was indicted. They worked to reduce the bond. They challenged the massive amount of discovery, which arrived through digital files so large that reviewing them could take months. Once again, the trial was delayed from its original February 2026 date while they sorted through everything. But every one of those legal battles was only preparation for the main fight ahead. In a murder-for-hire case without a confession, motive becomes the center of the entire argument. And prosecutors believe that motive had been visible in public through streaming platforms for years. So prosecutors demanded everything. The tollway shooting, the minivan, the manager with the dislocated hip, the posts, the interviews, the alleged gang connections, the money moving through accounts, and the 4 songs. The defense argued for the opposite approach. Focus only on the killing itself. Remove the years of surrounding noise. Force the state to prove an actual transaction instead of building a case around a feeling. Over several days in July, both sides presented their strongest arguments before Judge Anium. Prosecutor Rick Vela argued that the killing did not happen randomly and that no jury could evaluate a murder-for-hire case without understanding the years that created the conflict. He said the selected songs were carefully chosen. They celebrate crime, he admitted, but the crimes described in them matched the one listed in the indictment. Revenge payments, the feud killing itself. Defense attorney Michael Mola responded that the state was asking a jury to punish a man for his profession. A working artist, he argued, should not be convicted because of his lyrics, no matter how damaging a prosecutor makes them appear when they are read aloud without the music behind them. To support that argument, the defense called Dr. Eric Nielsen, a University of Richmond professor and co-author of the book Rap on Trial, who has spent years studying this exact issue and the debate surrounding artistic expression in trials.
The 2 rappers.
Their feud was open, it was public, it was in social media. This offense did not happen in a vacuum.
He testified that gangster rap operates on fictional characters, exaggeration, and stage conflicts, and that removing a verse from its artistic purpose transforms a performance into something it never was.
The rap music in this case are words and deeds of Mr. Conway.
He has also argued that jurors interpret rap more literally than any other genre, which is why violent imagery that goes unnoticed in country or heavy metal can become a confession when a black artist performs it over drums. Prosecutors responded with Dallas homicide detective Eric Barnes, who told the court that lyrics are never the starting point of a murder investigation.
This is what he does for a living. They do have a First Amendment right to make the music.
They are where the case ends up when nobody is willing to speak. That argument reaches far beyond one Dallas courtroom. Prosecutors nationwide have relied on lyrics against rappers for years, while the resistance against that practice has continued growing. California approved a law in 2022 restricting how creative expression can be introduced as evidence, and similar efforts have advanced through other state legislatures. So this is where everything currently stands. Judge Anium has not decided whether she will completely exclude the songs, allow certain portions with instructions to the jury, or let prosecutors present all of it. As of the latest hearings, that decision had not been made. And that is important because Yella Y has not been sentenced. He has not been convicted. He has not gone to trial. He remains at home in Dallas under an ankle monitor, with a $750,000 bond posted, a not guilty plea entered, and a schedule filled with upcoming hearings. His jury trial is scheduled to begin on August 24, 2026, with additional pretrial hearings ahead. Nothing has been decided. Everything remains ahead of him. That is where the goodbye truly exists, not behind him, but waiting ahead of him. If a Dallas jury convicts him of capital murder while remuneration, there is no sliding scale and no negotiated number. The sentence is life without parole. He would be 34 years old entering a Texas prison he would never leave. And the songs he created about keeping it in the streets would become state exhibits with numbers attached to them. If the judge excludes those songs, the state loses its strongest window into motive. And a case built on old messages, financial records, and witnesses becomes much harder to present to 12 people. So, the answer everyone is desperately seeking does not exist yet. One courtroom in Dallas is about to decide whether a man's music becomes the evidence that destroys him. Found this information shocking and unbelievable? Be sure to watch other similar and incredible videos on the screen right now today for you too. Thanks again for watching.